Round of applause and say thank you to Lynne for being here.
Thank you guys. You guys are doing the hard work.
I will say that somebody cheered when they heard that I had moved to Denver. So I don't know.
Are there more Denver entrepreneurs here?
I was booing.
And yeah, you're welcome. Oh look, it's Matthew Holt. Hi Matthew. Cool. Thank you, Lynne, for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Just wanted to go through a little bit of your background. So obviously you're on the boards of really impressive companies and you've been in the space for a while. What attracted you to investing in digital health? What's exciting about it?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like having invested in enterprise software in the past and also been in an operating role in healthcare and launching products internationally in the US, I really feel like this is the time. And, versus maybe past forays into health IT, just what we've seen both technologically, scientifically, the advances, and I think from a business model standpoint, the change that we've seen in terms of value-based care really has created this nexus of kind of business, climate change, technological, and scientific that's just, I believe, unmatched. And so that's what gets me really excited is I firmly believe, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, the way with which, healthcare is delivered, how we experience it, is just going to be incredibly different than it is today, and that's just incredibly exciting. So this is the time, and you guys are in a great space. I think there's been a lot of great highlights of early winners that we've seen in this space. I'm all about this being as productive and as fruitful as we see consumer tech or enterprise software. We've seen billion-dollar companies be made in this space. When we see companies like Teladoc, which we were investors in, is a $2 billion company trading right now. We've seen companies like Evolent as well be around that valuation, and so that's incredibly exciting.
Sounds like you've placed some very good bets.
Well, over time, winners and losers,
Yeah.
we all have them.
Yeah, the losers conversation, that's a different topic altogether.
You learn a lot from those, though, I will say.
Well, fair enough. Tonight is really about young companies that are coming to discuss what their ideas are, their product market fit, the go-to-market strategy, all of that in the form of a quick elevator pitch.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you could share, when companies are pitching you, what is it about the pitch that resonates with you and what you value and what they present to you?
Yeah. I mean, given that we're mainly Series A investors, so I know that a lot of the entrepreneurs in the room, it's kind of even pre-seed in a sense. But it's so important no matter what stage you are at. But in the Series A, there might be product market fit, there might not be. There's usually no business model fit. So what we're really trying to evaluate is the entrepreneurial team, the market dynamics and the segment they're going after. And I also think timing is really important. Healthcare doesn't roll very quickly, as many of us know. You can very much invest too early into a space. And so really understanding if it's regulatory dynamics or, are you in a value-based world or fee-for-service or whatever it might be in terms of the business model. But really for the team to demonstrate their deep knowledge, their vision, and the ability to kind of see around the corner. Now, those corners change. There's so many things in flux, right? Every day in the news, where is healthcare going to go? What's going to happen to ACA? So having the adaptability of that team is so important, and being able to think through what could happen and what does that mean, or where the vision is of phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3 of the company. And this isn't to say that you have proof points to all those phases, but this is what I'm going to build, these are the hypotheses I'm going to test, this is what I believe, and then here's what I then need to, for the next phase to happen, and might unlock another part of the business model or otherwise. So I think a team that can kind of articulate that in a really deep way, and when you ask the next layer of questions, they kind of have that next layer of answers. I think it becomes really clear who's done their homework and thinking, and even if, like I said, you don't have data points, what are you trying to solve for? What are the things that you'd like to see, or what are your hypotheses are just as important? And how are you going to get to those answers? And so that's in that early stages, I think a lot what we look for, and kind of really the market that you're attacking. What is the strategic dynamic, if it's payers, providers, PBMs, pharmacies, whatever it might be, and how will you scale over time? What I really liked in some of the slides of the overview of Project Zygote that I saw was, early on, you guys are talking about business model, and I just cannot emphasize that more, and really good to see is you can never think of that too early, and it seems, some people might think, I think in other industries, you might build something and then the business will come, once you have eyeballs, but these days and in healthcare, given the tight ecosystem nature and the monetization models, you have to think about it early. And so it's really good to see that you guys are doing that through this program, because it's never too early to do that.
That's great. Thank you for the advice. I wanted to keep going with that just a little bit. I know that when we were prepping for tonight, you mentioned the importance of demonstrating commercial traction. We also emphasize here the collection of evidence to prove the efficacy of a given intervention. What other types of information are you looking for besides the team and some of what you just described?
Yeah, on the commercial traction, again, there are various stages of a Series A company, and that's just my viewpoint. Obviously, you guys are pre that right now. But we will talk to providers and payers to understand the market dynamics and would they actually pay for this, right? So that ultimately gets down to who's really going to see the value, and you might not have ROI numbers, but how is this going to help them with top line revenue management or bottom line efficiencies, and that they can articulate that to us. And so, we really looked, because most of digital health, and I'll step back, this is not 100% the case, but I do believe most of digital health is B2B2C. And so if you believe in that, you're first getting enterprise contracts in a B2B nature environment, and sometimes what they are hunting licenses to then go into a B2C world, right? And some ideas are B2B in digital health, but they're usually one flavor of the other. It's very rare to have a B2C company, I believe. And so that's why we hang a lot upon our strategic relationships with payers and providers. So for JP Morgan, I'm running a provider forum with 35 provider CEOs, and then a payer forum with likewise on that too. And we use them for our diligence. We use them to understand what might have traction or where they might see value, where there are pain points. What is, as we like to say, what are real painkillers for them versus vitamins, and that your idea is really that, right, for them, and we validate that a lot. So you might not have a paying customer, especially in seed stage. I think that's mainly in the beginning, but that's how we would validate something maybe this early, is talking to some of the innovators in this space. But I will be, as I actually just say that, another thinking that I just thought of is that I also, because of the type of firm that we are, that we need to see something that will scale to be $1 billion company, because we're a diversified fund. Every investment that we make could go to a consumer company or an enterprise software company. And so we need to see something that scales. And so it's also really important when we look at things is we usually talk to our innovators, because they can see something or understand a need without the solution staring them in the face. But we also have to see that not only like the first early innovators come in, but that you can see, the early and the majority adopters coming in. So when you look at providers, there are certain providers, for instance, that are always kind of on the cutting edge. But I need to imagine that the next set, right, would also be customers of yours. It wouldn't just be, the Providences or Dignity's pretty innovative here in the Bay Area as well, that it would be, other, I'll just call them other provider systems that maybe aren't on that cutting edge all the time. Because to really get to scale, you need to be able to penetrate across those types of different customer sets.
Very helpful, thank you. In my experience in doing enterprise software sales into healthcare, everybody's first to be second. And so,
exactly. Well, or everyone, right, doesn't say yes but doesn't say no. And so targeting is so important. So when you say providers, there's tons of providers. Are we talking about community providers? Are we talking about academic centers? Are we talking about employee on-site clinics? There's just post-acute. There's just so many flavors, and to be really specific with your segmentation, and then within your segmentation, who are those innovators? I mean, those will be your first customers, of course, but making sure that value proposition transcends to the majority will be important. So just being really laser-like, and your advisors, mentors in this type of program can help you do that, is who really leans forward, because you can waste a lot of time in the healthcare space knocking on the wrong doors, where, again, they don't say yes, they don't say no, and your time is precious as entrepreneurs. You need to get to that first customer, and so it's really important. Talk to your fellow entrepreneurs. Talk to entrepreneurs who are a stage or two ahead of you. That might be in your space, and then you always give it back and talk to entrepreneurs who are earlier than you, right? Over time, I believe in that, but use the community. I think we now have multiple years now of digital health companies that have gone around and created commercialization models, but there's a lot of learnings for all of you to share and to know who really is in it and has the funding and has the wherewithal and will work with you through implementation to create successful implementations. And I always call them phase one implementations. We never used to like the word pilots, right? And phase two is full-scale rollout, right? Or regional rollout, depending on what you're talking about. But use each other, because people know who's there to play and who are the people who can get things done.
Very cool. Now, this will be the last question before we do some audience questions as well. But assuming everybody here is successful, when it's time to come and talk to the likes of the Kleiner Perkins, what does that look like?
Yeah.
How do we get your attention?
Well, hopefully we're not too scary. It would be like this. We meet and you get to know us, we get to know you, and really to hear your story. I mean, that's what is compelling to us. What are you passionate about? What is the vision? What has spurred you to do this? Because being an entrepreneur, I truly believe, is one of the hardest professions, and especially in healthcare where you are, I always call it dancing amongst giants. This is, and it's something that I intellectually love about this space as well, is how do you do that, right, artfully? And I think that, those are the things we like to talk about, and so I think it's kind of where you are today, where do you want to be tomorrow, and what does success look like for you? And so those are the conversations we have. I mean, a typical process we'd have a first meeting, and then what we would do is we do our diligence. I mean, and this is a little far ahead, but maybe this is helpful, but every firm is different, right? Some people do a lot of diligence in the beginning, before term sheet. That's the way we are. We'll do customer calls, we'll do management references, we'll look at your financial models, we'll talk to your customers, the rest of your team, do our diligence that we need to do before we get to term sheet. So, at quickest, that probably is, a week to 2 weeks. Traditionally is probably like a month. And then we go to committee. So you would present in front of our security partner, Ted Schlein, who doesn't really have healthcare investments, but because we're a diversified fund, you'd present in front of our consumer partners, you'd present in front of our enterprise software partners. It's a small committee, but that's how we make our decisions as a team. And so that's what it would look like. And you should talk to your fellow entrepreneurs. There's a whole strategy about fundraising, presenting, and again, I'm sure Project Zygote and Health 2.0 can help you think through that. But some tips I always hear, and from entrepreneurs and otherwise, is think about who you go to first, who are the friendlies, where are you going to learn from, hear all the questions that you're going to get attacked with, and then kind of go to the next phase of entrepreneurs that really hit that investment sweet spot for what you're doing, where maybe they've seen commercial success before, so they understand the space, they can help you in other ways. But there's a whole kind of fundraising tactic, and I know you guys are going to go through that here in this program in terms of the presentation at least, but there's also a fundraising strategy, and how do you go about that? And I think that's really important to learn too.
Totally agree. It does not sound scary at all.
No, but really, I know I was being a little like, I hope we're not scary, but honestly, we're really passionate about the space too. What we love is to work with entrepreneurs, and I think what we're looking for is, people that we feel like are dedicated, see that vision, have that passion, and are ready to be partners with us for a very, very long time. And so think about it that way. You are interviewing us as well. You are allowing us to be on your boards. And so it is a two-way street, absolutely. And because, in the best of terms, and the way I think we like to operate is that we are partners, we are in the trenches with you, we are doing customer introductions, we are helping you build your teams, we're helping you think about your strategy. And so you need to interview us as well. So you should go in there, obviously, there's a lot of capital too. We're aware of that. And I think, going in with that attitude of, hey, this is something that we need to get to know each other, but I want to show you, the vision, the work, the team, and what we've done, and we're really excited about it.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
I know that we're a little short on time, but are there any questions from the audience that we could field? Oh, all right. Start up here. We'll go, sorry, just because of time, we'll go through maybe 2 or 3 questions. So if there are follow-up questions that can't get addressed, we can take those and possibly forward them on to Lynne as well.
Sounds
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Hi, Lynn, thanks. I enjoyed your overview of the investing space. I'm curious, since a number of people are coming into digital health with very overlapping ideas, do you see any means by which digital health companies are really using to protect themselves against just copycats and Me Too's?
Yeah.
And do you look at that at the investment stage?
Yeah, it's hard. You think of it at like enterprise software, like IP is not the same as it is in drug development or medical devices. There's probably more drug development than even medical devices. So you don't have that same protection. So you have to think about moats in different ways. Moats can be, data, right? Or moats of, being able to even influence the patient, right? So I think there are different ways to think about moats in this space. It definitely is not usually the traditional IP route. Thanks.
Hi, my question is about timelines. In healthcare, I noticed that timelines just take a lot longer than in a lot of other industries, and I wonder how this plays out in kind of 2 places. One is when you're thinking about an entrepreneur runway. You mentioned most businesses are B2B2C. Well, that customer, right, is going to be a provider or a payer, which oftentimes sales cycles are 18 months to 2 years, which is a typical runway, right? So I'm curious how to navigate that. And then the second question is about the investment timelines. So a lot of times when I talk to my friends who are entrepreneurs, they'll mention they're pitching a 5-year exit strategy for an investor, and I'm wondering how you think about that, how that modulates given that you are a diversified fund and have to think about your returns across multiple industries.
No, that's great. So the first question just about timelines, I think you're right, and I think you have to think pragmatically about it and give yourself and say, okay, provider customers are 1.5 to 2 years. That's what I mean about really laser-like in what your value proposition is and articulating that up front. So I would say a couple years ago when we used to pitch our portfolio to strategics, we would bring in senior leaders from payers or providers, and our portfolio companies would pitch for half an hour each, right? 5 companies very quickly. And it used to be, here's my company, here's my vision, as if you're pitching a VC. I think it has to be completely different in a strategic scenario or for a sales and marketing, where instead it has to be, here's my company, what we do, and here's the value we can bring to you, and this is how we would envision a partnership. So instead of pitching our company and then thinking the strategic's going to meet you halfway and go, oh, okay, I know exactly how I'm going to plug and play into you. I think we've become more sophisticated that's starting to happen, but I just think you can waste a lot of time, like, oh, okay, that's interesting, and then you part ways, and maybe you get another meeting in another month or 2, right, with the right people. And so sometimes I think it's just putting something in front of them and either getting yes or no, but at least you've created a stake in the ground, spurs conversation in a quicker way. So understanding the value proposition and what that partnership or operating partnership could look like and serving that up right away. the targeting and segmentation that I was talking about, being laser-like on who really moves. And I think there's a very quick way to do that in my mind. Like, there's, can they articulate their needs, the strategic of me? If they're still like, well, we really are interested in digital health, we think it's an exciting field, okay. They don't know how digital health fits into their core business strategies. Who's at the table? Is it just the innovation team, or is it people with P&L responsibility? And then thirdly, who's paying for this? Now, if the innovation team has budget, now we're talking about something, and then how connected are they with the P&L units? Or the P&L leaders there with budget as well? And then fourth, I think one of the questions is, have they done this before? Are you the first through the factory, or are there 2 or 3 digital health companies that have already had partnerships? And if there are, you should be talking to those entrepreneurs and understanding upfront what they're like to work with as a partner. So I just think if there are these types of questions you ask yourself, you kind of can gauge where a strategic is. So targeting and segmentation is really important. And the third thing, and it's a little different, but I think we're almost getting to the stage of another wave here of digital health, because we now have more mature companies. So we now have companies that have been funded Series B, C, D, right? They're at a certain stage that they themselves can be customers of your particular product. So what do I mean by that? Like, think of the reimagination of the vertical players like Clover, Devoted, etc. These like MA, full stack players, they're looking for digital health companies to plug in to reduce their cost of care and improve their quality of care, right? Because they're on the hook. And so I think we're getting to that stage of where and those are probably Clover's more than Devoted, but there are digital health companies that are mature enough that they themselves can now be customers for some of the earlier stage digital health companies. So maybe another way to circumvent, right, that timeline a little bit and on another vector that you made me think of in that question. So that was a little longer answer to that. And then your second question of time to market, it's one thing that we are definitely thinking of and struggling with. I think there's a little bit of, you have to think of this, you never can take this out of where this sector is in terms of the maturity of the market. And we're a very emerging sector, right? I always say, and said this a lot, that this is a baseball game, we're in the second and third inning. So I think, when I look at a company like Teladoc, which I believe took over 10 years or so to build, that was also an era that didn't have the kind of funding that's going into this space. I don't think the strategics were as sophisticated or ready for digital health as they are now. So my hope is that that compression does take place, and I'm seeing it with some of my portfolio companies to where the revenue levels that we're at and how long we've been as a company are starting to compress in that time frame. I mean, if you even look at other industries though, there's always the outliers, right, of the companies that in 2-3 years got flipped for $1 billion. They're gonna be out there. But if you look at some of like Eileen's earlier analysis on unicorns, and granted those are paper, but those unicorns at the time, their average years was 7 years at that time. So I think if we can go from 10-ish to more around that 7-year time frame, I think we're really in line with other industries. And again, as our sector continues to emerge, I hope that the strategics are faster. They'll know what they want, they know how to fund innovation, and then they know how to execute it within their organization.
Lynn,
Hey.
Matthew, hey.
Hey.
Okay, so I think you're being a bit of a win.
All right.
Okay, because
They
here
gave
you
you
are,
the
you come
mic.
in and say, look, and look, I got to confess, health companies spend a lot of time trying to help new tech companies get
Yeah.
new providers and plans, and I build a business out of it, and blah, blah, blah. But really, the current,
They
you
cut
say
off.
go save the company. They say go sell to the incumbents and deal with all the crap of selling to the
Yeah.
current providers and past. They're never going to change the healthcare system. They love it being 18% of GDP and being as crappy as it is. And there's a guy called John Doerr, I believe, has some connection with your organization. And he invested in a company called Amazon, another one. He didn't tell Amazon, hey, go and sell a really good system to Barnes & Noble. right, or maybe I don't want Jeff Bezos in the conversation. They said, let's go and blow this thing up and do something brand new.
Yeah.
So what's Kleiner doing? Do you care? Are you going to do? Would you invest in somebody who wants to do something really big and brand new? And
Well,
you have one portfolio company, just says, called Livongo, which could add a bunch of stuff and be that brand new thing. You know they could.
Totally.
So, but they could also go the other way. So how do you have that conversation, and why aren't you being less of a wimp?
Yes,
I'm teasing.
I love it. So I think that, you know, okay, a wimp, what does that mean? You're talking about, no, I know, you love to be controversial, but I get the heart of your question, which is, we can all, I mean, in so many words, knock ourselves against the head or against the wall trying to sell to these slow-moving institutions. And actually, one of the areas that we're really excited about, and I've mentioned a couple examples, is forget trying to sell to them and just vertically reimagine them. So the reimagination of what a provider should be, we've seen a lot of interesting companies reimagine the PCP space. If that's employer on-site clinics or companies like Iora Health, which are value-based PCPs. I'm seeing now PCPs based solely on seniors. We've also seen, you know, even more kind of the next One Medical 2.0 kind of companies, right? So that vertical reimagination, instead of trying to sell PCPs new software and trying to do change management and hoping that they will take all these tools and reimagine themselves, forget it and just do it yourself, right? And the same with the payers that I mentioned, right? I mentioned Clover, Devoted. That's exactly what they're doing. And we're doing that ourselves with a company called Numeris. So I really think, like, when I think of what are the big ideas, it is absolutely this vertical reimagination. Now, when we talk about scale, time to market, how long it will take, and the amount of capital that will be raised, we're now talking about something very different, especially as we're talking about payer vertical reimaginations. But I think it's the big play. It might take a bit longer, but I think we've all seen that let's just do it ourselves and start ground up versus having to deal with legacy thinking, legacy systems, right? Legacy processes. We're actually really excited about that. So I'd say we're not wimps, but I would say that you also want to choose wisely where you do something like that.
Not an officially endorsed description of your firm, so thank you, Matthew, for that.
Love it. You gotta have a little controversy.
Fair enough. We thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to go ahead and move into the Project Zygo portion of the show. But just if we could give Lynne a round of applause to say thank you.